Hello and welcome to this special episode of the Rainbow Roundtable. I'm your host, Dr. Dan Sheridan, lead psychologist for No Reservations and Safe Schools mental health consultant. Today we delve into a discussion filled with both gravity and hope as we reflect on recent events here in Florida surrounding the infamous Don't Say Gay bill and its significant impact on our LGBTQ+ students, educators, and families. This episode comes on the heels of a pivotal moment. A settlement reached on March 12th between the state of Florida and LGBTQ+ families, marking a critical point in our ongoing quest for inclusivity and justice. Over the past 2 years, our commitment at Safe Schools has been steadfast. We've mobilized through rallies, engaged communities, and led students in marches to the very steps of the Capitol in Tallahassee, shining a light on the discriminatory nature of this legislation and defending the rights and dignity of LGBTQ+ individuals within our educational system. Thanks to these efforts and the relentless spirit of our community, we've seen remarkable advancements. Free expression restored. Students and educators can now openly discuss and explore issues of sexual orientation and gender identity free from the shackles of censorship. Anti-bullying protection strengthened. We've enhanced the safety nets within our schools, ensuring every student learns in an environment free from harassment. Gay-straight alliances protected. These crucial support groups can now thrive, recognized for their vital role in fostering community. Classroom references clarified. The rich diversity of LGBTQ+ lives can now be woven into our educational narratives, promoting a culture of inclusivity. Non-discrimination assured. The dark cloud of discrimination that loomed under this law has been dispelled, affirming the dignity of all students and families. Extracurricular activities protected. LGBTQ+ clubs and events will continue with a pulse for life, nurturing a sense of belonging and community among our youth. In today's discussion, we will dive deep into the origins of the Don't Say Gay bill, explore the reactions from communities and lawmakers, and highlight how Safe Schools has been sounding the alarm from the very beginning. But first, I'm honored to introduce our panel of distinguished guests, each a fierce advocate and ally in the fight for equality and justice. This is Scott Galvin. He is the Executive Director of Safe Schools and the longest-serving LGBTQ+ elected official in Florida. Scott, what are your first thoughts about this historic moment on Don't Say Gay?
I was taken aback. I didn't expect that we would reach this moment for several more years. I'm a political realist, so I was looking at how districts are drawn and conservative legislators from here and there, but it didn't occur to me that there might be a court settlement that sort of brought a quicker end to some of the confusion. So I was pleasantly surprised.
Absolutely. Thank you, Scott. And we have Tiffany Williams, the Director of Outreach for Safe Schools. She hosts the popular podcast, Tiffany Explains It All. Tiffany, so Don't Say Gay. Explain it all.
Oh man, that's a loaded question. I mean, when that law came into action, I think there was so much fear for not just the students that were affected by this, but also the teachers and the families that are part of this community. And being afraid of are we going back in time? Do we have to now go back, into the closet? And now that we finally, after 2 years having to go through this struggle and fighting for literally our right, we finally have a win for our LGBTQ+ community. And I'm really looking forward to the conversation today.
Absolutely. I look forward to hearing more about what you have to say.
Thank you.
And then we have Artemis Cruz, a high school student in Miami-Dade County Public Schools. Artemis, the news of the state settlement on Don't Say Gay. What was the reaction from LGBTQ+ students?
I don't think there has been a lot of a reaction because a lot of students still haven't heard or don't understand exactly what's happening. So this space discussing and informing people of the settlement is really useful for students and teachers.
Thank you, Artemis, for sharing that. And we have Kylie Summers, a teacher here in South Florida. Kylie, you're in the trenches on Don't Say Gay. What have your colleagues said in the first days after the settlement?
My name is Kyle. I use series pronouns. No worries. Happens all the time. I think we are still trying to navigate what this actually means. The settlement in 8 pages says a lot. And until districts produce guidelines, we don't actually know how any of this will be operationalized in classrooms.
Thank you, Kyle. And we have Harold Marrero, the COO of Safe Schools and a pastor. Harold, I imagine the state settlement on Don't Say Gay was exciting news at Safe Schools and for your mission of equality for students and teachers. What are your thoughts?
Well, I'm just really happy that we can say gay again. And my thoughts are, that this, even though it's a big win for us and it's something that we've been looking forward to, I think that there's still a lot of confusion around it and something that we need to work more together to, dispel some of like what the language is and what actually will be allowed in schools and what won't be allowed in schools. Because now, this has to go through a process with the school system, and who knows what they're going to do. So I think the fight's not over, but this is a major win for all of us. So I'm very happy about that.
It's just the beginning.
Yes.
Thank you, Harold.
Yes.
So thanks to all of our insightful introductions. It's truly an honor to have such passionate individuals here today. This segment is called Real Life Experiences, where we dive deep into the personal stories that illustrate real-world impact on Florida's Don't Say Gay bill. These narratives are based on fictional accounts, but reflect the genuine fears, challenges, and resilience of LGBTQ+ students, teachers, and families across our state. First, let's consider the story of Alex, a high school student who identifies as non-binary. Alex used to feel safe and accepted at school, a place where they could express themselves freely and engage in meaningful discussions about identity with peers and supportive teachers. However, since the implementation of Don't Say Gay, Alex has noticed a stark change in the school atmosphere. Teachers, wary of breaking the law, avoid discussions about gender and sexual orientation, leaving Alex feeling isolated and silenced. Friends who once spoke openly now whisper in corners, fearful of being overheard. Alex's story is not just about the loss of dialogue. It's about the erosion of a supportive community that once felt like a sanctuary. Now imagine Sarah, a dedicated elementary school teacher with a passion for creating an inclusive classroom environment. Sarah, who is openly lesbian, has always been a role model for acceptance and understanding among her students. She's known for her library of diverse books, including stories with LGBTQ+ characters. But with the new law's ambiguous language, Sarah finds herself removing books from shelves, second-guessing her lesson plans, and struggling with the fear that a misstep could cost her the job she loves. This isn't just a change in curriculum, it's a shift in identity, forcing Sarah to navigate between being a good educator and staying true to herself. Consider too the Rodriguez family, two moms and their son, Miguel. Miguel is proud of his two moms, used to share stories about his family freely. But since the bill, he's been taunted by classmates and feels pressure to stay silent about his home life. His mother's active volunteers at his school sense a growing distance from other parents and staff. They're torn between the desire to protect their son and the urge to fight for their family's visibility and rights. This is more than discomfort. It's a family feeling unwelcome in their own community. Through these stories, we confront the human cost of legislation that aims to silence and marginalize. But beyond the pain, there's also resilience, as individuals and families navigate this new reality with courage and solidarity. I want to open this up to our panelists. How do stories like these resonate with what you've witnessed in your own communities? What strategies have you seen employed to navigate these challenges? And what impact do they have on the mental and emotional well-being of LGBTQ+ individuals and their families?
I think for me, the biggest shock that I got from all of it was when I started going to school board meetings and where the public hearings, and just seeing the aggression behind some of the people that spoke against whatever was being proposed that had to do with LGBTQ issues. And how hateful it was. I mean, it wasn't even like it's one thing if you come out and you're talking about facts or science or even like you own, this is my personal opinion. But to come out and say just wild things about people that you have no contact with, that you don't know, that you have no relationship with, that you have no idea what the lived experiences are, and then have that be done in such a public way, that takes a lot of, gall to do. And I think that these laws what they do is that they end up mobilizing the fringe elements of our society, and they feel like they are the actual loud voices, and they take on that voice, and they tend to scream louder. They tend to say crazy things that the other side doesn't really say, and they tend to take away the spotlight. And then it turns into this self-fulfilling prophecy that then they do become the loudest voice in our society, when in reality they're not. And I feel like, people who are not for them, who are more on the side of progress or the side of sanity, tend to not want to be too much involved or really put themselves out there, because they don't know, or they just don't have time for it, or they think this is gonna go away. That's why the historical perspective is so important, because we have to speak up, and we have to challenge those the people that are trying to do so much harm to our youth, to our kids.
I think, to your point, the Williams Institute through UCLA did a study on families and the impact of this legislation. And what they found is that the majority of respondents, parents, didn't agree with it. And as part of the aftermath, there's also been a marginal increase in parent participation. But to your point, it's the folks who are shouting in an echo chamber. Mm-hmm. I think the piece that's been most disappointing is that while many of our school boards have policies around decorum, none of the hateful language has been challenged. No one has said, okay, we're going to pause because we have this policy that says that this is an environment that is free from discrimination and harassment, and what you are doing is harmful. I think there's been a blatant disregard for the Jeffrey Johnson Stand Up for All Students Act. Jeffrey Johnson was a young person who died by suicide as a result of cyberbullying. We will never know if Jeffrey Johnson was a member of the queer community or not. He didn't get to live long enough to tell us who he was. And so here we have this state statute that says we will not tolerate this type of hate. And yet people who have been entrusted in positions of power have tolerated it through their silence.
I think also it's a fact of the matter that you don't want to be the target. And that really, it's very interesting. And I have also been in these spaces of hateful comments being thrown around, or, they choose their words carefully. So it's not blatantly out there that they're saying they hate LGBTQ+, but the way they're wording it is still harmful. And my own personal experience, I think, was really interesting when I went to a school that was an advanced studies school. And the teacher came up to me and he was just like, I'm so happy that you're here to talk to our LGBTQ+ students, but I'm absolutely afraid of what is going to be okay for you to even say in the club. And I was like everything that I'm showing and talking to these students is okay by law. And he was just petrified of just, he was like, I want to have the flags out, and our students do too. And I've even seen students that when I go meet them in person, I either get the reaction of oh my gosh, someone from an organized community wants to come talk to us and spend an afternoon with us. And yeah. Or the other factor is that I've seen it because I've gone to marginalized schools that already get overlooked or not even given any support. And I've had students literally tell me, they're okay, are you just gonna promise me some nice words and you're not gonna do anything about it? And I understand where that's coming from, especially as I'm a white woman and I know that I have privilege. And a lot of these students is kind of well, I need to see action to really believe what you have to say. And so every time I go to these schools and I ask them, what do you want? What is something that you think would be beneficial for you to see that we are showing progress? And sometimes they will look at me and they're like, really? Are you actually listening? I'm like, yes, I'm writing down notes. Tell me what it is that I really want to push. And especially working with safe schools, I've always been pushing oh, this is what the kids want. This is what they're saying. This is, we should talk about this subject or bring up this, and, just trying to give them something. And I can't promise them, big change in legislations, which I've had students that are well, what are you doing about changing the laws? And I'm like, you know what, I'm doing the best that I can, just like everyone else in our community, you know, but I'm also very like honest with them. I tell them, like, if I go to like a recent school board meeting, I'm like, look, this is what happens. Like, I'm in these meetings and I see and I hear, and I've had, you know, people in high positions that they're listening, but they're not hearing. And that is the biggest problem that we have. It's like people are tired of like, I'm telling you, this is what I need to help us, and you're still not doing anything. It's like, okay, well then we need to like now, you know, be rebellious and fight back and go to rallies, do protests, do walkouts, you know, and just speak up. And there is so much fear in standing up for what's right. And it's even more petrifying when you're the only person in the room, when you're the only person in the echo chamber saying, no, this is not okay. And you do get targeted, and you do get the hate, and you do get, you know, the death threats. Like, let's also be very real. There are people who aren't part of the community, but they stand up like for us, and they get death threats. They get people online telling them horrible things. And it, over time, like, it wears you down, like, mentally.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine as a student, part of like the LGBTQ plus community, whose family may be also part as well, having to constantly go through that is like just deteriorating as a person.
Artemis, what, from your perspective as a student and among peers your age, what would be helpful for adults and organizations to know in terms of what would be showing support? That we're here to support you.
I don't know, maybe like having like what Tiffany does, like going to schools and like teaching children like, hey, you're safe, and like we as an organization, we can help and support you, because at school there's not that safe space, there's not that safe environment, because let's be real, the majority of the schools are not safe for all students. They highly disfavor queer and like marginalized communities in general. So having at least someone like from the outside like reaching out to you and throwing you a lifeline, like saying, hey, it's okay, I am here for you if you need me, that helps so much, and it makes such a large difference in the student's life.
When we spoke once and you said that your school GSA hadn't coalesced or come together, did that change?
It's still like a lot of students don't want to be part of the GSA. They're like either busy or their parents wouldn't allow it. And you know, as like the leader of the GSA, it's like really saddening to see that there hasn't been much unity or movement around having a more active GSA. And I've tried like having meetings, and it's really hard when people don't show up.
Yeah,
it's really hard.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting, Artemis, to your point, this settlement agreement reaffirms that GSAs are allowed. GSAs are federally protected under something called the Equal Access Act of 1984. So it's interesting that that language is included there. But what hasn't been challenged is the Parents' Bill of Rights, which gives rise to this permission slip, right?
Yeah.
And the permission slip is impacting many of our affinity-based, student-initiated, student-led clubs, and many of our student organizations that are less of like a culture war issue. We're seeing a decrease in student engagement overall because of this form that really inhibits our young people from exercising their First Amendment right of assembly.
Yeah.
And I think that for those in the listening audience, watching audience who aren't aware, when you have to take a permission slip home and get it signed by a parent before you can join a club, specifically, it says on the permission slip, you know, I give permission to my kid to join the fill in the blank club. And if you're not out at home or any other number of variables, you just say it's not worth the effort. And then, you know, I could come back at teachers too. You know, kids are watching the queer teachers in their schools to see what kind of leadership they provide. And when they cower, and I get why they cowered to an extent, but I don't forgive it. But when they see that their teachers are cowering, they think, well, then that's what I should be doing too. And they're demonstrating behavior that kids are going to replicate.
Yeah, and I think again, the whole vagueness of it is the big problem, and is the thing that is done on purpose. Because even with the permission slips, I don't know why no one in that room said, okay, but what about the other clubs? What if a kid wants to join? And this is why I always come back to this. What if a kid wants to join a Bible club that comes from a home that is non-Christian, or a Jewish club, or an Islamic club, or any other like federally protected clubs that they can? And what do you do then? Like you're limiting access to not just their freedom to be and to be their authentic self, but you're getting in the way of freedom of expression and free speech. Like that's aggressive.
I think it's like a quadruple threat, right? When we're talking about 1557 and the expansion under 1069, we are missing that this started in 2020 with the Parents' Bill of Rights, which said that school districts and schools were responsible for giving parents information on clubs. That's actually the origin point of these permission slips. And exactly to your point, they are meant to silence young people who come from households that are so deeply entrenched in their beliefs. And don't get me wrong, people are entitled to believe, worship in whatever way feels safe and comfortable for them, right? But we know that for some kids, what they are learning at home feels harmful to them. And so this permission slip, it does exactly what you said. It creates a very troublesome context. And I wonder, in the law where it says we have to take on the actions of a reasonably prudent person, right, to ensure that kids are not being abused, abandoned, or neglected, how does all of this gel?
But so much about the Don't Say Gay bill and that we're talking about today rests on fear, silencing, and isolation of people. And I think that the fear that we all have dealt with, and the sense of loneliness and dividing us, that we can't come together, that we can't talk about things, that we can't share identities together, has had such a profound effect. And I'm wondering how you all can think about this in terms of how do we help people not feel afraid? How do we help people feel a sense of community when we are constantly being told we cannot be a community?
I think it's just hearing other people's stories. I think that's kind of like the first like lifeline to just throw out. I mean, and I'm going to say that from my own personal experience. When I talk to these kids, like when I talk to these teenagers, I usually ask them, I'm like, like, tell me, if you feel comfortable, tell me your story, tell me your preferred pronouns, what's your given name, and just hearing their experiences. I've had stories of hearing like trans students getting their first testosterone shots, and like everyone in the classroom in the club was like, oh, we're so excited for you, And I'm like, this is how we create community, and feeling that closeness to each other is hearing your story, is hearing, your trials and tribulations. And, everyone has their ups and downs, their achievement moments, and the moments where they feel like the loneliest. But just knowing that there's somebody just sitting next to you being like, I want to hear your story, the good, the bad, the ugly, the best parts of it, and I think there's like this good, like this sense of like just feeling like you're being acknowledged, like your experience, your existence matters, and I think that's like the little seed that starts to grow, and like there's more stuff that follows in pursuit. In that.
And that's why I'm really proud of the digital programming that Safe Schools initiated, actually starting under COVID for similar reasons. But, with COVID closing schools and then Don't Say Gay essentially making schools off limits to Safe Schools and our professionals, by going digital, we were still allowing people the opportunity to hear stories of other people, to see other kids. And that's one of the reasons that we're, I'm hyper focused on everything that we do being youth hosted. I want the kids to see themselves in the faces on their screen, whether that's the TV screen or the phone screen. And I want them to continue to hear those stories of support, because when your teacher folds up tent and goes home, so to speak, or when you've got a school administrator who's not supportive, you can still connect with other kids like you, thanks to the internet.
Yeah.
And again, that idea of like connecting with people on a human level is what's most important now, because the fear that this type of laws like raises resides, and it's based on the dehumanization of groups of people. When we are able to understand that we are humans and we connect with each other, we're stronger together.
Yeah, and there is a ripple effect to your comment, Dan, that this happened, and now we see the overcorrection in many spaces, and that overcorrection takes time to reorient to the middle, or to where it should be and where it's supposed to be. And for me, the message that I have is, for those that can, you must act. If you can, you must act. For those that can't, do it in very creative ways, so that you don't get in trouble, but you're not allowing the laws to just completely put you in a space of fear and really in captivity to something that is so vague that it would get challenged. So, and we saw it happen. We saw the teacher that showed that movie that got fired, the Disney movie. We saw Strange World. Yeah, we saw all these like crazy things happen. It's like, okay, yes, it's happening, but if you can, continue to push, continue to be that canary in a mine, where let's see where we can take it. As they push us, we need to push back as well. Because if there's no pushback, we get walked all over, and that's what happens with communities that are marginalized.
And part of what made us susceptible and in danger with Don't Say Gay is that so much of the LGBT community themselves didn't associate with it, because gay couples my age, so to speak, don't have kids. We don't know anybody in the school system. So even to this moment, there are a lot of LGBT folk who, because they don't have kids or connections to the school system, never thought that it was really that big of a deal. And then we could get into the whole like liberal bubbles of people who live in states like California or Massachusetts, who just were like, oh, it's not really like that, is it? I mean, it's just sort of like hyped in the media, but you can really just go about normal stuff, right? Yeah, no, we can't. So, that was one place I felt we could have done better.
And I think, just very quickly, class plays an enormous role in this.
Mm-hmm.
When we think about intersectional identity, and we think about the just socioeconomics of all of this, right? For those who were able to pull their kids from public schools because they had choices, did exactly that.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And so, until we are able to really reach across the table and say, it doesn't matter if it's your kid, my kid, their kid, we're talking about the lives of children, and we have an obligation, human being to human being, to say this is wrong and no more.
Yeah.
And Kyle, that's really a place that the LGBT community needs to do a lot of work politically, is being involved in other minority groups' causes. A couple of weeks ago, I went to a rally in support of the folks in Haiti, because their country is under incredible duress right now. That's just a simple way of putting it. There was nobody from the gay community there, the queer community. Then last Sunday, I spoke at a rally of teachers in downtown Miami who were, rallying in support of the duress that teachers have been put under. There was nobody from the gay community there. I mean, yeah, okay, I was there, but I'm not counting me. We need to be as passionate about other people's problems as we'd hope they'd be passionate about supporting us. Strength in numbers.